Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our second Alpha Playtest series, hosted here by the wonderful folks at We Are Nerdsmith. Um, we do not have a Tessa playing with us this evening, so just as a heads up, but we do want to thank the folks at We Are Nerdsmith for hosting us very much so. A quick shout out to their sponsors. We do have We Are Nerdsmith is sponsored by um, Die Hard Dice and um, World Anvil. They also have a Patreon that you can find by following their links to become a patron. And of course, they are running a Kickstarter right now. They are less than $500 away from their last listed stretch goal where everything becomes glittery. So if you want glitter options for all the wonderful pins that they have for their pride pins, feel free to go check it out and get yourself a set of, or one of, however many it is that you're looking for, pins. They're all dragon eggs. There are 2 clutches worth, so there is a large number of representation out there for you. If you identify in one of these different groups, I'm sure you can find it. Currently, the Pride Rainbow itself is unlocked as glitter, but that's the only one that you can get glittery right now, folks. There's 18 days left to go, and it's going strong. For those of you that have already backed it, if you're one of that 142 backers, the people there here at We Are Nerdsmith want to thank you for your sponsorship and belief in that project. Speaking of which, a portion of the proceeds will go to the Trevor Project as well. So just know that if this gets super popular and there's a lot of excess money, the Trevor Project will benefit as well. With that said, my name is Chris Geary, and I'm one of the people who is working on Omens Rising, along with the rest of the people that you see here on the screen. And before we get into introductions, I want to remind you all of what is Omens Rising and what to expect, because we're going to be talking about encounters again. But the world of Omens Rising has been influenced and inspired by a number of JRPGs that are beloved. The Final Fantasy series, the Suikoden series. There's influences of a number of different anime, like Howl's Moving Castle, and a variety of other elements from anime as well play a role here. And we are working diligently to kind of give bits of those games, of that, the feel of the JRPGs to our game, as well as to that pacing that you find in some of your favorite anime, where there's some very nice kind of slice of life, getting to know the characters, and then a crescendo of action and kind of playing that ebb and flow throughout things. So if you love JRPGs and anime that have that nice little back and forth of scene and summary, we have the game for you. So going on to the rest of our team, I'm going to go across the top, starting with Indy, played by Chantel. Remind us who it is that you're playing, and if you don't mind, let the folks in on a little secret as to what kind of game, what kind of theme to a game you would love to see play in or run maybe with Omens Rising once it's out.
Okay, I am Chantel B. Chantel B on Twitter as well. I'm playing Indy, short for Indecisive, the silent walker who apparently really cares about the consent of inanimate objects. the type of game that I am suddenly getting a lot more interested in is horror or psychological thriller, partially because I'm a psychologist, I imagine. But the way that this game tends to work or seems to work is there's a huge focus on the narrative and and character development. And because both of those things are so focused in, that's the genre that I'm kind of looking at this and going, yes, let me have this and see what happens if I put it here.
Excellent. Thank you, Chantal. John, you're next. Remind us who you're playing and what's a type of game that you would love to see using Omens Rising going forward.
Great opportunity to remind myself what I'm doing. Hello, I am John. I'm Ryamasa, RY0MASA on Twitter. I'm playing Trim today, who very not loudly, but very forcefully cares about the consent of inanimate objects, and specifically their hopes, dreams, and ambitions. And then I forgot the last bit because brain.
What kind of game would you like to see run, or maybe run yourself with Omens Rising when it's out?
Sky Pirate Western. That's
right on brand.
I've got a brand and I know what I like.
Absolutely. And over to Andy. Remind us who you're playing and what kind of game would you like to play in or see run with Omens Rising in the future?
Evening all, I'm Andy at Anthony Tift on Twitter. I am playing Rook, who's a little impulsive, but hasn't met a library they don't like yet. I'm with John on the Western airship, but very specifically heists. I like heists, I like chases. I think this can work well for that.
Sky Pirate Western bank robbery, just saying.
I dig it. Heists. Love to see it. And that brings us to Dave. Remind us about who you're playing and what kind of game you'd like to see run with Omens Rising.
Hello, I'm Dave Silva. I will be playing Burley, which is short for Burley, and he traded his ability to feel in order to save himself and a few other jade farmers, and now he's just trying to reconnect with things. As far as what kind of games I'd like to see, because the mechanics are so radically different than a lot of other RPGs, it uses cards and not dice, and it uses like a card spread. I actually want to see pretty much anything that can be run in this, because I want to see how traditional stories or non-traditional stories play out using the very different types of mechanics. So it might be a cop-out answer, but that's my answer.
Fair enough. And that brings us back to the island city of Catel-Wakan, where we left our players after a successful bizarre encounter where they acquired a table in order to acquire a table and are now moving their way through the city, figuring out where to go next. Obviously, somewhere within the city to, let's say, maybe store what you've purchased rather than trying to carry a table with you everywhere you go might be good. Yes, maybe so.
Well, I don't mind carrying a table.
Burley doesn't mind carrying a table. That is true. So, as we are looking for the rest of where this ship might live, Trim, you found the heart of the ship. Did you not?
That I did.
What what does the ship need next?
I think I'd have to talk to the heart to know that better.
Is that something that you'd want to do in public or in private?
Depends on the table. I think Trim is okay with it either way.
Does
Okay.
the table have terms of service?
No, I mean, that's, if it doesn't want to talk here, it doesn't want to talk here.
Oh, that's fair. That makes sense.
I'd like to think that I'm holding the table on my shoulder
Mm-hmm.
so that it can feel like it's in the air because that was such an important part for the table.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Trim, you can sense that the table is happily humming at this point, in kind of that, childlike way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Indy, what was it that you were searching for in the bazaar? Or here in Catalwakan? You were searching for a decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
A direction?
Yes. I'm here looking for both direction, decision, and presence.
TS or NCE?
NCE, presence, like being in the present. Because I'm not, and I know that.
You seem to have done quite an adept job when looking for a table to stay in the present.
Yeah.
How'd that feel for you?
It felt good. It doesn't feel enduring. It just felt good.
It is but a fleeting moment in many ways. Remind the audience again of the decision, the two paths that Indy is debating between or looking for guidance.
I don't even think I mentioned it before, but what Indy is deciding between is there are two paths that they've been sort of earmarked for. On the one side, in the Silent Walkers, the aim of the Silent Walkers is to stay in the present, and so anyone that is in a leadership position is expected to stay in the present and lead that way. But there's sort of a different form of leadership that's people that live in the past, or people that focus on what happened historically. Indy has a link to that also. But in order to connect to history, Silent Walkers need to disconnect from the present and focus solely on that. So they essentially become almost outcasts from their own culture when they decide to become historians. And so Indy is trying to decide which one of these is more effective or gonna fulfill the idea of greater good better, but also do I want either of these? Like, what's going to be best for me, but what's going to be best for my people as well? And so that's what Indy is trying to decide between these two decisions that are actually three decisions.
And do they feel as though they are making any progress towards what they seek here in Catalwakan?
To a degree, yes. Having met someone who speaks to tables or speaks to items that wouldn't normally speak has kind of nudged Indy in the direction of being in the present, which is the sort of leadership direction. But they were spending a lot of time thinking about historically what tables were doing. So they're still indecisive, which is where the names come from and why they've taken it, why they've accepted it,
Love it.
basically.
Love it. Rook, you found some interesting bits and bobs. Last session. Do any of them feel like they're making progress towards what it is that you seek?
There is definitely a very, very tiny gear that, like, you need serious magnification to see the teeth on it, and a very small kind of tool for straightening pins, and both of those two things feel very important.
So an element of progress could be said to have been found.
Yep.
Excellent. Burley, you are seeking to reconnect in a variety of ways. Now, this one is a little harder to necessarily pinpoint, but how does it feel?
Did I miss who that was addressed to?
Burley.
Okay.
I missed that also.
Oh, no worries.
Cool. I was like, was that me?
Nope. For Burley, you were looking to reconnect, which is a little bit, I guess, general. It's not as easy to pinpoint something to find. How does Burley feel about this? Is there any sort of path sort of forming? Do they feel like there's some sort of connection being made?
So I can say this Burley style. There's always a path if you're willing to make it. There's not necessarily any connection there, but if you put things together, they'll connect if you apply pressure.
I love it. As you all are kind of, I'm going to say you're kind of meandering toward the outskirts of the bazaar as if you're trying to figure out where to go next. And you get, Trim, you get the distinct impression that the table would prefer to have a conversation somewhere less open. With that in mind, you do know that Burley is from Catalwakan and has made it known that in the lower decks there are more affordable accommodations for rooms and such.
I don't think we need to stay in a room for that. I could probably just do it in an alley somewhere.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, if we need a room for us, that's a different thing. But I don't think the table cares if it's a room or an alley. I think the alley would be better because then I can see the sky.
There we go.
Really, do you know any, like, nice alleys?
Nice alleys? The alleys are
Like
neither
on the-
nice or hostile. They're just alleys.
No, I mean, like, it's kind of like a It's like a wider one with a bit more space. It's clean.
So like a street that people don't walk down.
Yeah, well, not as wide as a street. Like, okay, like, tiny alley and then like street, like somewhere in between. Preferably where you can see up straight into sky.
Sky Alley.
Yeah.
So Burley will think about that for a second. And well, once you get away from the markets, buildings get further apart. And any alley probably would fit Sky Alley by your definition.
Why do we need an alley?
It's more just spaces in between buildings. But it seems to be the naming of things that's important with some people, so I don't make a judgment here.
So it can be a little bit like quieter. Just so.
Are there any parks? Trees? Open spaces?
Open spaces? Yeah. You have to walk.
I'm a walker.
Are you cool carrying the table? Because I can't carry it all the way if we get... Okay.
So if no one's like going to object, I think Burley will probably take the group to like a rocky part of the beach where it's not exactly good for anything functional, right? But it's open. It's there's some grass not far from there, and there's sand and rocks, and then water, sky. Kind of covers the elements there, and quiet because there's no function, and the people could tell we're kind of very much about the purpose of things, so not busy either.
And where would Burley set the table?
He probably wouldn't think to set it anywhere until someone asked him to put it down. Just stand there with it.
Fair enough. So as you reach this less frequented beachy area, grass nearby, you can hear the water lapping against the beach. The currents, at least in this position, don't seem to have generated heavy waves, and sky is bright overhead, wispy clouds here or there, but otherwise it's a pretty clear day. Where would you want the table to sit?
Does it want to sit somewhere? Trim goes over and just puts a hand on it.
It doesn't seem to care one way or the other, as long as it's not thrown into the water again.
Anywhere on ground is fine. Barely, you can put it down wherever. Just not in the water, preferably. We did just kind of buy it.
Okay.
Burley sets it down, and you don't have chairs to sit around the table. It's not, it's about, I would say, a map's distant across one direction, and about 2 maps widths across the other. So it's elongated, but not really a table for eating at or for someone's dining space.
Trim does a quick check to see if it's okay, and if it is, sits on the table.
Okay. It says it's not the sturdiest here, so it wouldn't recommend sitting on its edges.
Trim kind of parks in the center of it, kind of in line with, like, spine in line with
Mhm.
the post. And then kind of starts thinking about a ship, right? Starts thinking about the process of building an airship. And it's building, like, in their head, they're building the skeleton of it. They're building, the ribs on the kind of boat as you kind of keep to form that kind of hull. And as it does, it kind of, like, they kind of put the table sort of where they're kind of guessing the bridge would be. They're not sure if they like it quite there yet, but essentially they're trying to share that thought and those images, if they can, through the contact with the table, and sort of see if it has any input on what part it's interested in next.
As you conceive of this and are kind of communicating to the table what your plans are for it, you will note that the top, and it feels pretty clearly that it's just the top itself, maybe with the bracing around it and the bolts that are securing it, but you're not sure, seems to kind of vibrate with a resonance when you are shaping the hull, almost as if to say that they once were part of a hull.
Okay.
And as you're building out different pieces of it, you'll note that the base itself hums lightly when you are detailing different support beams and pillars, as though it had once directed or held the support of a ship of some sort. But when you get to the space on the bridge, the table itself kind of sings out. And for those of you watching, if you are in eyesight of that gauge that was on the front of it, that had what looked like a compass, but instead of the 4 cardinal directions of the 6 primordial sigils, you will notice that it spins. And Trim, you will feel a clear sense of anticipation and excitement to travel specifically.
I think the next step is to take you home, Trim kind of says under their breath.
Early being completely unaware of any of this, just looks at them. Looks like the compass is broken.
What?
Your compass, it looks broken.
How do you communicate with the table?
I'm not really sure. I can just I can sort of feel at things, and they can sort of feel back at me.
That seems somewhat unusual.
Haven't met anyone else who can do it, so probably.
What is things when you feel at them?
What do you mean?
What is a thing that you can feel at? Are people a thing, or are objects a thing?
Pretty much anything that has come from the world, like anything that was mined or like cut down, like like forests and quarries and stone and wood and metal occasionally. They were a little bit harder to hear, but
So everything.
yeah, except people. People not so much.
Everything, but not everyone.
That works.
Not people.
Yeah, not people. But if it doesn't have a voice, then I can hear it. Feel it. Sense it. Instinct. It's complicated.
Can I try something? Indy is Silent Walkers are telepathic, so Indy would like to try to think it, Trim. Can you hear me?
Chris, I hadn't thought about how this would work at all.
What happens if a telepath is
Thoughts?
saying is communicating with you?
One of the things that Trim is very
Yeah.
good at is connecting with things that seek purpose and helping them continue their purpose. And I think that how open you choose for Trim to be to that which might be telepathic might have some overlap there. What do you think?
Can we do a card pull for this? I don't know how that would work, but I'm kind of curious. You are muted.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go and make this into a check. So we're going to jump over to, let's go to instead of the spread, let's go to our check screen.
Yeah.
And let's start with Indy. So the first thing that I want to know here to kind of see how this might work is how is it, like, what aptitude would you be using to communicate with Trim?
For now,
Mm-hmm.
it would be Aethral.
Aethral. Okay. So now draw 2 cards and tell me which part of self. Are you using your Aethral self to connect? Are you trying to do it so mentally? Which of those seems to fit best?
Could you repeat that for me, please?
I'm trying to see which suit might fit your attempt the best. So clubs is Aethral, hearts is emotional, spades is mental, and diamonds is physical. Seems that spades or clubs might apply here.
Yes.
Which one is it that you're choosing to use?
Spades.
Okay. So let's
Staying
go ahead and
mental.
play a spade and then discard 1 card.
I'm going to play this spade,
Okay.
and I will. Discard this one.
Okay. So we have a king of spades, and your base Aethral is which rank?
4.
4. So it's great. So it's a base 12, yes?
Yep, and it's also my affinity suit.
Oh, yes. So that's a +2. So that's
Nice.
14 plus the king, which is 13. So that's a 27.
That's pretty good.
Hear me.
Yes, this is an excellent attempt. Now, how, in the way that you envision, John, in the way that you envision how Trim hears things, which aptitude of Trim's is it that leaves him open?
So I think it would be interesting to. So I think the way you described like the resonance of things, I think is a really interesting way to. I don't think really Trim like talks per se to stuff, but like it's more like a feeling of like a humming or like a pulse or something kind of earthy. So I want to roll with diamonds for that because it also ties into why like they can do it in the first place. So
Okay. And which aptitude would they be using? They're ethereal as well?
Yes.
Okay. And so draw 2 cards.
Okay.
And you're not playing to resist here. You're playing to see how open you are.
Yeah, or if like it isn't necessarily Trim personally that responds back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's convenient. So I need it. I would
play
need a
one?
diamond for this, right?
Yeah, diamonds is what you're looking for.
Okay. Well,
Or of course a joker.
Yeah, I don't actually have this. I have to go pick it up from you, right?
That or you
Or
can
how does
play
that-
offsuit for 1 point. Which means in this moment they're more closed off than normal because they might be focusing on the table.
Oh, that's fair. Would for 1 point?
Mm-hmm.
Point of what?
So it would be your ethereal +1 because you're playing
So
offsuit.
just playing. Okay, got it.
And then if diamonds is your affinity suit, you would gain that as well anyway. And I don't remember what your affinity suit
Yeah,
is.
diamonds is for the kind of that reason.
Yeah.
It worked out really well in our character creation. It turned out.
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't have a single diamond, so I'm gonna have to play offsuit for this one, I think.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter what I use; it's just a +1, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a way you can ditch a card that you don't want to keep, and then you can discard another one you don't want to keep if you play offsuit.
Cool, I will do that. So I'll just give it a +1 normally.
Okay.
And then I will discard that.
Okay. And so Indy will find that Trim, that there is a connection. There is an opening there. What is your base ethereal again?
12.
12. Is that one that had affinity alignment though? Did that have a +1? Do you have the little dot mark next to it?
No, I have different ones.
Okay. So that one is just a 12 plus
Yep.
2 plus 3, so 15. Okay.
I specifically remember when I interestingly fun little view into the characterization process, folks. I specifically remember that all of Trim's like stronger approaches from the character generation process are all affinity suits except for ethereal because it's not something they're consciously doing.
Mhm.
Nice.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So Indy is going to find that there is definitely an opportunity there, but it is one that they will have to, I don't want to say push their way in because that doesn't feel exactly correct, but they will need to be a little bit more forceful than they would with another silent walker. Does that make sense?
Yeah, not silent walker has capacity to learn, sort of thing.
Yeah, like there is something there that makes Indy believe that they could establish a telepathic connection with Trim, but it's not one that seems to be readily available for telepathic connections to people. So if you choose, you could push the door open, so to speak, and send the message through, or you could choose to not, because you have a high enough success that you can make it happen.
Slight detail to this too. I think like so. I don't know what. I'm curious. So because this is why it's nice to have designers at the table. Chantel, what do you think it's like when you're, I guess, in the telepathic waiting room, as it were, right? Like, what does that feel like or sound like or whatever?
Well, there's some nice music.
Piped in elevator music.
Just piped in. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice temperate kind of environment. It feels a little bit like sitting in a waiting room. It really does. Like, but with more of a with more of a sense of there isn't an appointment time. So it's
Okay.
just when someone's ready.
Kind of like standing at the door to a house, kind of waiting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the closest in terms of answering what Chris asked, it's less pushing the door open and more, how about I knock and see if someone's home.
Cool. That's a great metaphor. So I think if I would like to, and I'd like to add this little detail because of Trim's specific situation. It's the sound of like when someone has loud bass music playing behind a door, like in a house, but not quite, like you can't really hear it, but you can feel it pounding. There's like a boom, 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 boom from behind, in the house somewhere. In the house? Is the house? Question mark? Not sure. But you can feel that on the air, I think, standing on Trim's metaphysical doorstep.
Metaphorical and metaphysical doorstep.
That's great.
So if I knock, what happens? Does anyone?
If you knock, there.
Does it just feel like someone's knocking back?
No. Let me just make a little bit of randomness here to select. Remember, when I do this, a heart is yes, a diamond is yes, but, so you'll need to be probably a little more forceful than a light knocking. And clubs would be not unless you were to push on forward. And a spades is just no one answers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I will go ahead and drop this card down. And you got a diamond. So what I'm going to say is that metaphysical door, it cracks open very slightly. And that sound, you can feel the reverb kind of come out from behind it. But it seems to be drowning out your knock. So a yes, but. Would you like to knock louder or peek in? Say hello?
Yeah, it's the just the hello? Is someone in there?
You will actually get a very I mean, of course, the sound of that you were hearing before does kind of settle a little bit. It's not as loud in your metaphysical ears, but you'll get a, what do you require?
I wanted to know who was here, if anyone is. You don't sound like Trim.
I am, but I am not.
That's a little. I'm a little concerned. Given I thought I was speaking with Trim. Is Trim around?
Trim is always around.
And who are you?
I am the essence of Trim.
That's unusual.
Puck thought it was unusual as well.
Yeah, he does think these things are very unusual. Out loud, they will say, Trim, you have a very different internal voice.
How is that different from my external voice?
You
I have
sound.
a quick question for John before you go
Yeah.
any further. Has John or has Trim ever actually spoken?
Trim isn't so. Trim isn't aware it exists.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
So,
'cause
I just wanted to check.
No, Trim's entire thing is basically no one told them how they survived their thing originally, and so they've just developed a feeling for it and have kind of been flying by the seat of their pants, essentially, and just they're like, oh, I can, yeah, I can touch tables. Okay, cool. Like that's different, but okay, I guess that's a thing I have now. And it's sort of like instinctively developed it on their own without understanding where or why or how this happened.
So, for the audience, Trim's character has an artificial heart. And this artificial heart is actually made of a substance called aetherite, which is the closest connected physical object to the aether or to magic that exists in Omens Rising. And as such, it boosts elements of how Trim interacts with aetheral items. So, and anything in the world of Omens Rising has some element of aether in them, which is why Trim can speak with inanimate objects.
Can I add in a subtle thing that happens when Indy and Trim start speaking telepathically? I want one of the bells in the clock to give just a very light chime, which will catch Rook's attention because I ain't supposed to do that. But that's like
I love it.
As far as like Rook tells what's going on, has been like between open mouth and frantic notes, and now the clock chimes and they're just kind of having an intense day now.
Scribble, 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 ding, what? Good. Mid word, the ink is slowly growing on the page.
So, Indy, with all of that in mind, your response?
There's a part of you that can communicate with me in my native tongue, I suppose.
I don't get it.
I don't either.
Okay.
But you can't hear it.
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be hearing.
Oh. Okay, that's... Yes. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like the table again, or?
Indy is going to address the heart. Again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is Trim aware that you're here?
How would the heart respond to that?
They've never asked.
On a literal,
yeah, there you go.
On a literal level.
Yeah.
They've never asked.
Like
Well, why would they ask? They don't. It's who. What? Okay. Why would one ask? You've never told.
Trim can hear many things, except for the blind spot of why they hear.
And why can they hear?
and the room just sort of pulses.
It hurts your head a little bit, Indy, when it pulses. Not as if it's aggressive, but as if it's a little overwhelming, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, a bit loud.
Mm-hmm.
What that is there a need to make that noise?
Slightly softer pulse.
Oh no, is Trim okay?
No, it's
Is
good.
Trim
It's,
still alive?
no, Trim is fine. No,
Okay, cool.
no, that was more like the heart is sulking, because you asked why
Oh.
it can't hear it. It was like me, and then you were like, "Why are you doing that?" And it was like, "Oh, you asked me." But that was the way it could respond in that moment, because I don't think like language is not something like I think it is used to translating into. Like I think it because Trim feels mostly in reverberation and resonance and imagery and that kind of like flickers of image. So I think language is difficult for it, so it chooses to answer with expressions of aether if it can. I think is how I'm gonna say that.
Trim, you have whatever it is that's communicating with me, if you can't hear it, is quite loud when it wants to be.
I still don't get it.
Oh, I still don't either.
Okay.
Do you and you've always been able to do this?
Not always.
How long have you been able to do this?
Since I was like 8, 9, something like that.
Well, that's after when you would learn to talk. So what happened before you were 8 or 9?
I died. Can we talk about something else?
Yeah, yes.
Cool. And Trim goes back to talking to the table.
The table has decided it really wants direction.
Oh, that's a mood. Indy feels the same.
It wants to be steered. It wants to be guided.
Mm-hmm. So I think Trim kind of pictures it sort of directly behind like a wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And then puts it in front of the wheel with like a question mark.
It responds better to being further back, like in a navigator's position, than in front.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can do that. I have to put the table behind an airship wheel, I think, is where it wants to be now. To get that home, though, and I don't have transit. So
we need to find a way to get the table to presumably the rest of a ship.
that is much better than the idea I had. I was going to go sit at a skyport until a ship from my foundry showed up.
Or both work.
I guess we can do both at the same time. Huh?
Yes. Do you have a ship for the table, or are you building a
No, I'd
ship for the table?
I'd have to build one, I think. This one's passionate.
All right. It's a passionate table.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take to build a ship?
Depends on the material I can find for it, although I don't need to do that here necessarily. If you too many strong pieces in the same spot and they can start to clash. So I try to keep the stuff that is suited for a particular project. So it could be like a couple months, several years, depending.
So at this point, we find that what is being explored is going to be the creation of a ship. The 3 of hearts is our number that we get for our party. The 3 being the number of the divine, and hearts being this emotional connection, this desire that is leading us to, or leading the group toward the answer. There's some sort of growth involved as you build the ship, but you get a strong sense, Trim, that there is wisdom in the repurposing of parts that can be transferred to a ship of this type.
Okay. Actually, no, I think I might need to find more things here.
Like what?
Like a wheel. I think the wheel's next.
The wheel. How do you know if something is clashing, if they're too powerful?
Put them next to each other and see how they feel about each other.
Oh, it's that simple.
I mean, usually, sometimes it can get amplified or not amplified. Exacerbated with more pieces being added on later. But if it's just 2, I can usually feel it.
Is that good? Should they exacerbate each other, or is that?
I mean, sometimes the differences exacerbate with multiple pieces, with things that are resonances that are okay within 2 pieces may not be okay with 3. You know.
So like personality clashing.
I was gonna say like chords into like musical chords, but yeah, that works too.
Oh. No, that makes sense. Let's find a wheel then, I suppose.
Yep.
Now, the bit that might be a little bit of a challenge is the path of the physical realm, which has to do with it might get expensive. It might have you might find too many options. In order to best traverse this exploration to find the pieces of this ship, each of you will need to identify different ways that you will help narrow the scope to provide greater focus on what is needed.
Trim is going to walk around to market again. That's...
Trim wishes to walk around another market.
Mm-hmm.
And there are multiples throughout the city, or the island. Is that correct, Burley?
Oh yeah, you go to any port and there's going to be a bazaar by it.
How many ports are there?
There's 8. So that's a lot of walking.
If Trim were to be seeking a ship's wheel that has adequate wisdom, where might you direct Trim's search?
Well, I don't know how wise wheels get, but you can always go to the embassy and they can send out runners. But I don't know if they're going to find the wise wheel, but they can find a wheel that meets a physical description.
Can't really describe what I haven't found yet, so I don't know if that'll help.
Could you not describe what the table would like most in its company?
Trim looks at the table. Puts a hand on it.
It seems
projects like an image of of a bridge, like a finished bridge with the table there and the wheel missing, and like the person outline when you run away in the anime so fast that the thing just blinks.
Yeah.
That, but with like a wheel, just like an empty wheel, just missing there. And sees if it has any feelings on the subject.
The response that you seem to get is that the wheel wishes, or the table is seeking a wheel that's known many captains.
Something really old. They're probably well cared for.
You want an old wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Something
well
that
cared
can
for is a
survive.
given here.
Hmm?
I say that without any ill intent, but we like to take care of things.
Yeah.
It wants a
feel-
survivor.
We tend to worry about function.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you could trade a unlearned wheel for the learned wheels of a captain at port.
Okay, no, I like that. Because if it's actively being used... Okay, we need to find the oldest ship in the port.
If you want old ships, we can go to the lower decks. But
Sure.
I think anything like that's going to have been scavenged years ago.
On like a ship that's still sailing.
Then you want the ports, not the ships that were built on.
And
Why not?
Trim sort of like Wheel that is still being used. Wheel that is waiting to be used? Question mark.
Is there a place where ships go to get decommissioned? Like
The bottom of the ocean.
a little more orderly than that. Like if there's official logs of like cultures that like they go, okay, we took this ship apart here and sent this piece to here and this piece to here. Sort of logs could help track down a particular wheel that's bounced around a lot.
I don't think I've ever seen a ship decommissioned, just fixed.
Do you think that embassy might have an idea of a ship where all the parts have been constantly replaced except for the wheel?
The embassy is for finding lost things.
Oh.
I'm not sure they're going to keep sea logs.
I think we should look for a wheel that wishes to be used as a wheel that has seen many captains, but isn't being used now. In the same way that the table wished to be flying.
Okay. In that case, you said
Is there
lower
a-
decks?
Those are the ships the island are built on, but they've been scavenged for whatever resources they could. You could find a wheel there, but it probably won't be easy.
Well, ideally, we find a wheel that nobody's found.
Well, someone would have had to have found it. Well, is it finding it if you make it?
That's
sure.
a philosophical question, if I've ever
Yes.
heard one for this
Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Easy
it is.
philosophical questions at 9:09 p.m.
It's only 11 in the morning.
I mean, you hit Burley with like the whole ship of Theseus thing earlier, so I'm just trying to replay the fable.
You're right. You're right. I did just casually drop a ship of Theseus, didn't I? Wow. Yeah. No, Trim is like, I think this one has to be a wheel already. So I think it's pretty simple, right? We find a wheel that nobody's found in the lower decks, and it has to be a wheel that's already a ship wheel, and then the table has to like it. Seems pretty easy.
I'll go get table.
Good.
Has table
Very
chosen
good.
another name, or is it just table?
I mean, you could say names at it until it felt good about one, but I haven't tried. That's a lot of names.
That is a lot of names.
Good question. We, if we're building a ship, that's a lot of parts. I don't think we can pack them all with this.
Oh, I wasn't planning on building it here. I was going to take the stuff I get and go home with it to the actual shipyard.
We have shipyards.
Not like mine.
No, they're yours.
Well, that makes sense.
I mean, you can all... Like, I wasn't just going to leave. Like, you can all come with me. I'm just going to be out in a minute anyway, because I have to figure out a way to get back there. But... Anyways, and Trim goes meandering off in some direction, counting on Burley to turn them around if they're going in the wrong way.
You're
are
muted.
muted.
Sorry. Excellent. So Burley will lead the group to the lower decks. Can you give us a quick, Dave, give us a quick rundown of what do the lower levels look like in Kutelwakan?
Okay, so just as a quick high-level thing, Kutelwakan was built on wreckage of like dozens, possibly hundreds of ships that all kind of coalesced due to the currents during the desolation, and the survivors initially held things together using like rope bridges and riggings before creating a magical sphere that kind of calmed the waters for the island itself, and they turned that into a base. And so there are shipwrecks upon shipwrecks underneath the island, and that is the base of the island itself. They're not necessarily in the direction or the angles that you might want them to be. And early on there were efforts to build pathways through it, but as the island grew and changed, these became more Byzantine and hard to navigate, and they're not really used anymore, except by the ports where people will co-opt them for usable space, because if it's not being used, it should be used for something, right? And this is where like affordable hotels are, or just simply storage for businesses or people that need to keep things. But there is like a labyrinth underneath the island that is the lower levels, and you can probably get there from anywhere close to the ports themselves, or through any of these like storage or hotel kind of facilities that they'll have a access point on the surface and then some access point below. Do you need more than that, or?
I think that's perfect. So, as you all are kind of walking through the lower levels, you'll see these different places and such. But you will also notice, if I am correct, there are areas of the lower levels that are either submerged or lesser used because of a variety of different things. Yes?
Yeah, so you probably don't want to open any doors that are closed, because some might just open to the ocean. The lower levels have also been, some sections have been converted into fisheries. They like whatever use we can get out of them, they've found a way to utilize that. So one does want to be very careful while traveling. However, I think we're in good company. If you can talk to things, they can tell you if there's water on the other side, maybe.
Very possibly.
That's fair.
Trim, one of the things that you're going to notice is that much of these are the elements of what holds the lower levels up and keeps them in place is much more ship-like than what was seen above. There's a lot more of the structures and beams and support elements that are still kept in their form because they're strong in that form, and to be reformed could take away or weaken some of what they do. So you might find archways of upside down hulls in some of the walkways holding things up. You might find like what looks like a full wall out of a ship's cabin that's inset, and the door is how they come in and out of that particular space. So there are elements down here that definitely catch Trim's attention because of how ship-like they are, while up top it's transitioned over the years. It may have started similar to what you see down here, but the longer that they didn't have to stay in that form, there were more options available.
Okay. Yeah, so I think Trim is just walking, like, one hand, like kind of one hand on the wall at all times, just kind of like feeling their way around.
Indy, you, more so than in the market, you've been in bazaars before or markets before that are selling repurposed goods or selling antiques or things of that nature in your travels. That's not something that's unfamiliar. But down here, you feel surrounded by the past in a way that you did not up top. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
And Rook, you are seeing all kinds of different bits. You'll see different maker's marks and things that, have no reason to be covered up or removed. You'll see different architectural styles, or shall I say shipwright styles, that definitely harken back to books that you may have run into. There is definitely a sense of history in the lower levels that feels preserved in some ways and yet out of place in others. And Burley, it feels like home.
Oh yeah, Burley knows, like, well, if I go down this hall and I make 2 rights and a left, I get to the dive point to go to work.
And one of the things that Burley might think of is, where are the areas that have been less scavenged, at least within Burley's time, where there might be places left to explore.
So I to answer that out of character for a moment here, I think the answer to that is probably going to be the more dangerous areas of the lower levels, the places that are difficult to get to, places that are flooded in a way that they can't be repurposed, or places that have like damage where if you take a misstep, you may, put your foot through whatever flooring or whatever's, being used as flooring. Places that have rot or degradation, which is, it's not a safe place to be, and therefore it tends to be avoided, right? That's
Gotcha.
It's not like the fisheries, because the fisheries may be underwater, but that's like regulated space, right? There's also like wells that have been, fastened, like created using this repurposed from these buildings, or not buildings but ships. But that would probably be your best bet, but you are exposing yourself to danger to try and find these kind of materials.
So on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the card for the Aetheral's presence. And you're going to, first of all, does anybody want to kick this 3 of clubs down the road? The divine seems to be intervening again, shall we say.
What does the 3 represent?
The 3 represents the aether, the divine, fate. Clubs is that of passion, creativity, the element of fire, things of that nature.
I mean, that's not like creativity certainly seems like something we need at the moment.
You're muted.
On the other hand, fire on the lower decks is not. So
Oh, there's I'm here for that. I also have an axe.
It's like,
This is the aether making its way in. You also remember that the clubs is the suit of the aether and the aetheral self. So it's kind of doubling up on aetheral influence.
kind of want to see where that goes.
Does anybody wish to
It's-
replace it?
So here's the funny thing, because
Mhm.
Chantel wants to see where that goes. Indy kind of doesn't. Being below decks is and sort of basically
Mhm.
very, very lots of past, a little bit
Mhm.
scary. So I guess it's whether or not the player or the character wins on that one.
Can I just interject something for a second? I love the idea that as we move further into the lower levels, we have the physical pressure of the ocean around us, and you're going to feel that, and then Indy has this additional like weight that is being layered on top of that. Right?
Yeah.
I like that thought.
Yeah. I'm gonna kick it down in the interest of Indy.
What are you gonna replace it with?
I have
For
no
the
idea.
Aethral influence. So which of the two cards in your hand?
Yeah, okay. Because clubs is also passion, is that right? No.
Passion, creativity,
Passion
the
creativity.
Aethral, and the element of
So-
fire.
So I'm gonna replace that with this here hearts.
Okay.
Because essentially at the moment Indy's like, all emotion, help. All emotion, I'll go.
So the Five of Hearts is now the Aether's influence. Aether is, or the five is representative of the number of power. It is the strongest influence that might get thrown here, save for maybe a king, depending on the settings or setting. We have hearts, which is water, emotion, growth, and wisdom. And what is going to happen here is, Burley, you're going to find yourself directed toward the part of the ship, or the part of the lower levels where some of the ships were unsalvageable. Rot got to them. They got waterlogged pretty bad. The water itself did not preserve the ship in the way that it did with some of the others. There's flooding throughout more of those parts of those ships than what you might see where the fisheries have it better contained. Okay.
I feel like swimming is inevitable now that we have hearts in this position.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think at some point means we're gonna have to leave the table, because I remember correctly, it's a metal table.
It's got a metal base. It is quite heavy.
Yeah, so Burley may be Burley, but I'm not sure he's swimming with that table.
Honestly, that's reasonable.
So would the group like to find a place to store the table as they go? I'm not going to make that into a whole adventure on its own.
I am currently trying to figure out if Trim can swim.
Oh. But-
I think the answer is no.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Rick can't swim either.
Well,
Bunch of nerds.
well,
It's more like he hasn't got around to learning yet.
And never had a reason to, yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think no.
wow.
Does Indy know how to swim?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, Indy knows how to swim. The silent swimmers.
Yeah, there you go. You'll find yourselves kind of at this crossroads in the lower decks, where Burley will say, well, we either need to decide if we're carrying the table with us, or if we're going to park it somewhere because we need to put it in a storage unit, at least temporarily, kind of thing. So
I think that'll also be the point where Rook, like, the knowledge that they're underwater becomes real, that they're underwater.
Oops.
Oh no.
Yeah, all
Oh
of a sudden,
no.
all of a sudden the thoughts turned to reality.
Are you all right, Rook?
This doesn't leak, right? Like, ever?
I can't
Tell me
answer
it
that.
doesn't leak.
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. Kind of tries to lean against the wall, not looking as terribly nervous as they are.
Burley will feel the wall for leaks.
Are there some?
Well, the concept of ever, I can't answer for that.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's always fine. Right, Bishop? Yeah, everything's fine.
And Trim's like, I don't think that's its name. Also, I can't swim.
When Trim says, I don't think that's its name, the bell rings again.
Bishop's my best friend. They're not really here. Like, I just talk my way through problems and I address it to Bishop. Have I offended somebody?
And Trim, like, if you're cool with it, will walk over without asking and put a hand on the clock and kind of think the general equivalent of, does that explanation make sense? I don't think he's talking to you specifically, but like if you want him to talk specifically, rumble?
You the gears that seem to not be move, like they seem to be kind of locked at the moment, kind of attempt to move and then give up with kind of like a
And Trim takes a hand off the clock, steps back and goes, I thought you were talking to the clock. My bad.
The clock can hear me? Like, really hear me? Oh dear.
Trim looks at the clock like, you want to answer that? Like,
no response whatsoever. It's just dead silent.
And like, Rick starts grabbing spare cloths and pouches and patches and kind of wrapping the clock in an ever getting bigger. Barely stuff in the bag.
So
probably not anymore.
I feel like we're at an impasse, and I think now would be a good time to describe what Burley wears.
Okay,
go for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Burley's clothing consists of not necessarily cargo shorts, but shorts made up of like pouches that have been sewn together, and sturdy material. I would say that he wears a fishnet shirt, but that gives the wrong impression. He wears a shirt of fish netting and rope. So he will start working on a harness for his shoulders so that we can swim tandem, which just means you need to hold your breath make your legs like mine, or hold them still and just make yourself as flush to my back as you can.
For like how long?
Because it doesn't occur to him that you wouldn't want to get in the water. Like he's still trying to cope with doesn't know how to swim.
Oh, and I think for Trim it's mostly I don't know how to swim, which isn't like a I don't want to get in the water. It's just like this is a fact. Like I don't know. Like I can get in the water and sink. That's about the extent of what I am capable of doing currently. So when you kind of start, Trim goes like, for how long?
Until we come up.
Can I get a better estimate than that? Because, like, I'm okay with it. I just don't want to have to breathe in the water. If that makes sense.
I don't think you can do that.
You're not a fish.
I could do it badly.
Pink fish.
That's drowning.
Right. That's why I'm asking if I can. If
They're
there's
right.
an estimated period of time, so I can know if I can hope I rest that long.
If you need to come up, you can tap my shoulder.
Oh yeah, no, that solves it. Okay.
Are we going to be just underwater the whole way, or are we on the surface? Because, I mean,
The surface
could
is
just-
not. We're underwater now.
but I mean, if we're going further underwater. Indy takes a shield off of their back. It's a fairly broad shield. It's large enough for them to sit on. Someone could use this. It's not usually used on water, but it could be in theory. Depends on what is underneath. But if we just need to stay on the surface, then it would be fine.
In the water.
We're going down.
I think so. We have to go where people don't scavenge.
I see. Then no, this won't work. And they put it back.
Yeah, so I'm okay with it. Let's go. Can I like move my arms when I'm down there so I can try to feel for something, or is it?
What I'm picturing is basically like a handhold made out of rope over each of Burley's shoulder blades.
Okay.
So that, again, as long as you're not giving him resistance, I think he should be strong enough to pull you. Possibly pull both of you. I don't know, like that. Like I don't want to like talk like superhuman levels of strength, but underwater your mass is distributed and he knows how to swim, right? So that's why I'm saying like make yourself just flat. If you can't mimic his leg motions, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
But that way, like Rook and Trim can just hold on to the handholds.
Does Rook
Burley-
wish to actually go underwater, or does Rook wish to stay with the table and support maybe through other means?
Ooh.
Splitting the party is not a death knell like it might be in other games.
Rook would like really be torn between the might find something that nobody that's alive has ever seen versus might die.
Those are the only two outcomes.
Those are the only two outcomes that Rook sees right now.
I feel like there are other possibilities in between these two outcomes. Also, it's fun to swim.
I think Rook could give it a go. Like, they in theory know how it works, and you should be able to learn everything from a book. So Try.
Rook has read
Excellent.
about swimming.
Oh no.
So,
Good.
at this point, before everyone jumps in with both feet, the balance card is now the 3 of clubs.
So what does balance represent?
This is what's needed in order to balance out the your complication, which is the 6 of diamonds. How finding something in the physical is problematic. It's not always an easy path. It has to be limited and provide some sort of focus to find something as broad as just a ship's wheel that has wisdom.
So I just to talk from Burley's perspective for a sec, like if clubs represents passion, right?
Passion, creativity, the aether.
That's something that he's been like searching to rekindle is his passions.
Yep.
And swimming was like part of that. Right? Like he found his worth in being underwater. Right. So I'm perfectly happy with this being here because Burley is like, let's get in the water, let's do this.
And what about Rook or Indy or Trim?
Trim has
Ready
never
to
been.
roll with it.
Yeah. Trim has never been free floating in a place where they're not standing on something. So I have no idea how their particular brand of sense is going to work in free float.
That's
underwater.
fair.
So I'm excited.
Do you feel like they would trust in the aether in this case?
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's trusting in the aether or like, I mean, I think to Trim it's something like following their instinct, but it's anyone else who understands what Trim is doing, it's probably trusting the ether.
Fair enough. And Indy, our holdout from the last one.
Oh, I've used my I have kicked. So Indy is trusting to the aether at this point.
Excellent.
If I can just add something, just thinking about Trim and his journey here, this has got to be the most unique way for him to get a steering wheel.
Yes.
Definitely, for sure. I think mostly Trim usually builds them because like for Trim, like up until this point, they've mostly just found the raw material that wanted to be things and figured it out from there and built it themselves. Part of the reason why this is unique from them is they're going out to find things specifically that are already finished in some capacity or another to incorporate them, because that's not something they've really done before. So this is fun, I think is the word.
I'm looking at like, passion and creativity, and I feel like that might resonate here with just like the adventure of finding these parts for you. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, you're good. It's a good point for sure. So I think it works overall.
All right then. As you dive into the waters and you make your way through different chambers, Burley, you're going to find kind of yourself headed in a direction that is unfamiliar to you until you reach a certain point. And it's at that point that, Trim, you're going to feel a little more resolute that this is the right direction. And it's in this space that, Burley, you'll recognize the ship's hull that would be the next one over has been braced significantly because it had caught fire at one point. And no one has been through that chamber since they made it structurally sound again.
All right. So I guess this is a matter of like finding a way in and into an oxygenated chamber.
It's not knowing what's beyond those doors is really what it comes down to. It's been sealed, but sealed more, I think, out of fear, I want to say, than because anything is wrong with it. Opening that door won't add any extra water as far as you know, but nobody goes there because it's cursed in a number of ways. How many ships underwater catch fire?
All of those that are not careful with their oil.
That's very true.
All right. So I think Burley will motion, like turn his head and, tell people to cover their eyes for him to open the doors, just in case there's any kind of like soot or anything in the water that's going to blind you or impair you in a more permanent way if your eyes aren't closed when he opens them. So, and then we've already taken the plunge, so why stop now?
There you go. The bounty, or what can be won from this, is going to be connected to the 5 of spades. I just want to know if anyone wants to kick that one down the path.
Before I answer that question, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I've been talking quite a bit, so please go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't know if your question was my question, which was just before I do anything with that, what does that mean?
Yeah. Can you define the 5 of spades first?
5 is the number of power. It means that there is something of significant energy or power of some sort beyond this threshold. Spades is the mental suit. It is connected to drive, to communication, to motivation of sorts.
And to the sky.
And to the sky.
Yeah,
and the element of air.
I mean, I have a card I want to play, but that's like too perfect not to like leave that where it's at.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm keeping that. That sounds great.
Also, I think these guys probably need air.
Yeah. So, Burley, I'd like for you to make a check, and I'm not going to switch screens. You can just play it on here for me. Go ahead and draw 2 cards. Let's start there. And when you open this, which of your character's aptitudes are you going to use to make sure you do so as safely as possible?
Oh, interesting. While I would love to say fortitude, I think either dynamo or poise is a better answer.
Okay. And which one would you like to do? Both of those sound excellent. Dynamo is about turning actions into results.
So I think poise is actually the answer here because something I think is important is to show that Burley is very knowledgeable about what he's doing, and isn't just going to like pull the doors open in a way that's going to, release whatever might be in there or flood a chamber, but take a conscious position around that.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And so, what is your base poised?
It's a rank 3, so base 9.
Okay, excellent. And then, go ahead and draw 2 cards if you haven't already. So you have 4 to choose from. And then, which aspect of self are you going to use i.e., which suit are you going to rely on?
So I have a question because I've been hoping to get the chance to play this the entire time. How does a Joker work?
A Joker is the Fate Intervenes. It is the highest point card. It depends. Is it the red Joker or the black Joker?
It's the red Joker.
The red Joker is the Fate of Opportunity. Basically, it means that things kind of just happen for you. So it makes things easier.
All right. I can't not do that then.
Okay. So go ahead and play that Joker and then also discard one card that you're not going to keep. And the other two will remain in your hand.
I'm going to just put this over here.
That's perfectly fine. So basically tell us what your character, what Burley does in this circumstance as they, as fate basically helps them do this as flawlessly as possible.
So I think we're going to remove the barring strut, open, like just crack it open for like any kind of pressure release. Make sure that there's nothing like visibly dangerous coming out. And once that's cleared, go ahead and open them, in a way that we can all enter safely. And like this area is probably like blackened because it was the reinforced section of the ship. So what I'm picturing is there might be like a ladder or something like that that's in this flooded area, but a door or a hatch above that that is probably not necessarily available, like it's been like blocked, but we can unblock that however that needs to happen.
Okay.
And that'll give us access to the rest of the ship, which is, while the air is stale, there is air.
Excellent. And that is and that works perfect. So you find yourselves up a ladder and into an area that has not been witnessed in quite some time.
Oh, and I guess he would turn around and hold on to the passageway to let Rook and Trim off first.
Okay. And it is in this space that you will find a pile of rubbish from where they kind of like tried to pull away as much kindling from where the fire was as possible to keep it from going, from burning any further. And in that pile of rubbish is the wheel of this ship.
Trim almost goes neat and then realizes they're underwater as bubbles bloop, bloop, and go.
No, at this point you wouldn't be. There's air here.
Okay, cool.
As soon as you go up that ladder and up the hatch.
Okay. Cool. I thought we were still like this whole thing. Cool.
No, this would be where there's stale air, as Dave was describing.
Sorry, missed that segment. Okay.
So you can say neat all you want.
Yeah, in that case, neat. I think that's it. And then Trim will walk over and sort of like navigate through the trash to pick it up.
Excellent. Rook, as you all return, and we're going to kind of speed up just for the sake of time. And as you all return back to safety, to where the table was being stored, Rook, I would like for you to tell me what aptitude might you use to identify the age of something?
Normally, I believe would be very inquisitive. It's running down the multiple, lines of search in a card catalog, looking for unique markings, unique metals, that sort of stuff, just like that 300-point checklist of, is it this? No. Is it this? No.
Excellent. And go ahead and draw 2 cards. Draw up to 4. And tell me what part of self might you use if you're looking at this wheel to identify anything about it, because it does catch your attention.
So many choices. I think poised. I'd say it caught enough of attention. There's some interesting metal or scroll work on it. And Rook is kind of falling into patterns, and so's trying to be the smartest one in class and not quite give away everything there is special about it.
Okay. And so are you going to go with spades for mental, diamonds for physical, hearts for emotional, or clubs for ethereal for how you're going to identify what these... It's actually each one, it's 2 things. It's the design of the spokes of the wheel, and then the metal stamped end caps on each handle.
We're gonna go with clubs for ethereal. It's
okay.
Kind of talking, but Rook can't hear it. And I'm gonna play the king of clubs.
Excellent.
And then how does one discard?
Just drag it and drop it on the table somewhere. So the king is a 13. Your base is what for poised? Which rank?
Poised is 9.
Okay.
And
so,
it is the affinities.
Okay. Clubs is your affinity suit?
No, sorry.
Oh.
Diamond.
Gotcha. So
it's got a little dot next.
Gotcha. So that makes it base 10, so 23. And then your affinity suit, you said, is not clubs, so 23. You accurately notice that this design is particular to a group of river nomads. They use a 12-spoke design, specifically 12. One for each of the aspects of aether. Yet they heavily are influenced by the one that some call the Weaver. And the stamps on each one of them are engraved, all except for one, with the name of a previous captain. And this group doesn't turn over captains very quickly. So this comes from a ship, a barge style ship. Though water, it has lasted probably many, many years before it ended up here. And you would guess there's likely some wisdom there, yeah, based on the descriptions. Trim, what do you do?
Talk to the wheel.
What do you ask it?
Where is home? Like, where would you feel at most home?
Home is everywhere. Home is following the lines.
Like ley lines?
Are there any other sort?
Arbitrary lines on maps?
Who uses those maps?
Not me. And I think Trim thinks about the fact that essentially 3 ley lines converge where they come from,
Mm-hmm.
and says, and sort of like pushes that thought out at it.
It's as good as any place to launch.
Cool. And Trim turns around and goes, "This is it."
And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a short break, 5-minute break, and we'll be back for some Q&A. And so definitely put any things that you have in chat. And thank you to everybody. So see you shortly. And we're back. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We have returned, and we're going to talk, unless, of course, we have questions, which we do not have any questions in chat. So we're going to talk a little bit about the spread itself. And I want to start with how did we like adding in the kicking, like interfering with the cards that were played? Because that was the wrinkle that we just added.
So while I didn't like utilize it, I really liked how it changed the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I like that there is a in-character reason why someone was trying to change this fate for us, right? And I think it added a deeper element, right? It gave us agency where there might not have been agency before.
I dig it.
I enjoyed doing it. As the kicker. I enjoyed doing the kicking, and I enjoyed trying to decide whether or not it was me or the character that wanted to figure out whether or not, like, who controls that. Mm-hmm. Which throws up an interesting question on, you know, who is in charge of the spread? Is it the character or is it the player? Like, who is it? The aether? Is it the individual? So yeah, from a meta perspective, I think given last time we were playing a lot with like meta then character, I quite liked the combining that happened with that. Good.
There's a lot more back and forth, but it didn't seem to cause confusion. It seemed to augment the play, which was my only concern, was that we might end up having some awkward back and forth. So
I think that is actually what people are more used to. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're talking about a mechanic, now we're playing with it, now we're talking about it, now we're playing, and now we're talking and playing. It is just a natural back and forth that happens.
I think you're right. I feel like we actually got more character interaction that felt natural through the course of the spread as well. If that makes sense.
It was actually kind of interesting because it almost felt like, compared to last time, it felt directionless in a weird way. Not like I think it was good that way, but I was like, just having played both of them back to back, it was very, very apparent. Like, the first one was like, here is a lot of information, and I was like, okay, and then this one was like, here's less information. I was like, oh right, yeah, because last time we got a whole bunch more than this, huh? Okay, and that was like good to see the contrast between the two, and I think I really like this iteration more now that I adjusted to it from the first time. But like, doing them back to back was a little jarring at first because it was a very different like paradigm to play in, but like, it's, for me at least, it's the one I'm more comfortable in at the start, which was fine.
Okay.
Yeah, there was I think it flowed a lot more naturally in this because we were interacting between the information coming out.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of the drip feed of information. It's like, here's some context. Okay, what are we going to do with that? Here's some more context. Okay, here. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and it built off of the previous things, which actually fits the character creation spread a little better because you added some details and then you built again and then you added some details. So I think that it mimics what we've done with previous spreads a lot better. What other thoughts did you all have?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I think a lot of the back and forth that happens as the spread comes out kind of shifts the feeling from to flip to video games from a turn-based game to a real-time game. Like, it's a different talking about the mechanics. Ultimately, it's what we're still doing, but without having to step back and compartmentalize the actions. Like, to use a chase scene for an example, if you're trying it in the Dragon game or Pathfinder, it kind of gets cumbersome and it doesn't visualize real well sometimes. And I think this is a much more dynamic flow through, so you're not worried about, okay, Dwarf 1 hits Goblin 1. It's, okay, they made it through this train car and into this one, and so on. So I think it aids the flow.
I dig it.
Here's a hot take of 2021. So I think it's lukewarm. I think the thing for me that's really interesting has been like, I have been like, part of the design space for me has been really sort of looking at what we call, at like the terminology we use to describe games, right? So there's a lot of games that are very like collaborative storytelling games, and there are a lot of games that are very almost like you are reacting to things coming at you and dealing with them as they come up. And that kind of, and they're like, it's not to say that any one of those is particularly the best or good way to go about it. They're both great for different things, but to me very much, it felt kind of like the difference between that versus in first run was a much more like, it was a, here's a scene, fill it up, script it out, then play. It kind of felt like, what is the term? It felt like devised theater, almost, where like we had a plot, we had an idea, and then we just sort of played the scene out to see how it felt. And I don't know about the rest of y'all, but for me, like when I was playing that, my thought was from like, okay, cool. Did that scene make sense based on what we had just said? And this run around felt a lot more like, okay, how am I reacting to what the new things coming out are, because I didn't know what they are. And it's one of those weird things, because I personally like to respond to stuff I don't know. To me that's a game I personally prefer to play, just because I like device theater is a thing that it's part of like drama therapy we do, and it's exhausting. So this one felt like I was being less responsible in a very specific sense to the overall arc of a scene, and more for putting my piece into it and sort of seeing where it fit in the whole place, which I kind of like personally.
Well, and honestly, that fits better with the rest of the game. The game itself is much more about collaborative storytelling and improvisation. And originally, when we started building these spreads for encounters, we had wanted to make these spreads both for planning and for randomness. And I think at the end of last session, we realized that if it's more interactive like the rest of our game is, then it gets to do both at the exact same time. And we no longer have to worry about, is this spread cumbersome? The spread itself becomes just part of the gameplay when there are stakes on the line. And it's not this add-on feel that it was kind of carrying with us when we came into this playtest. That, for me personally, was one of my goals as a designer, was how do we design out this feeling that this is an add-on rather than something that's intrinsic to the game, because I didn't want the spreads to be add-ons. I didn't want them to be forcibly added to the game in order to reflect the roots of cartomancy divination. I really wanted them to be just as you're think like the lazy river in a water park, and then all of a sudden you come around a corner and it changes speeds and then maybe drops a little bit in its elevation, right? Like it's just a different pace. It's something different that changes up the path that you're on, and it feels a little bit more intense because stakes are on the line. And I think that a lot of what we've done, last time and what you're talking about this time has helped reshape it in a way that makes it more intrinsic and to how we want this game to feel for people.
I would like to say real quick, I like that metaphor specifically because of the fact the place with the most velocity change in a lazy river is the place where people get on and off. So the more things you add to the river, then that's where the speed changes, which I like. It's very good.
I would just like to say I want to go on a lazy river again. Please vaccinate.
I know, same.
Yes.
I don't do things at water parks. I get in the lazy river and I stay there for 8 hours. It's
Mhm.
wonderful.
But that's
Me
good.
too.
That's a good day for me.
Relaxing.
It's so good. But okay, but on that, that's funny because that was something that I wondered. What happens if the game, because you asked at the top what kind of adventure we'd want to run. What happens if you don't want a lazy river? It's like, what happens if you're playing a game that is a rapid, that is just rapids?
Well, I mean, so the game itself, because it is improv and narrative based, it kind of is a lazy river, is the metaphor. If you're looking to make it all rapids, you would have a lot more spreads involved because you'd have a lot more things at stake.
Would you have more spreads? I think I'm interpreting the word stakes differently because acting.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I think high stakes, I think high meaning, as opposed to changed meaning. Does that make sense? So, like, if someone is in danger, a random person in danger is going to be low stakes. A family member in danger is going to be high stakes. So, to me, the spread, the way that the spread sits.
But
if you're in another genre, then you would want to be able to achieve or find high stakes through that. So, like the connection with the aether, you would want to be able to find high stakes.
Yeah, that's absolutely something that can be done. But the difference is outside of the spreads, there is no opposition. So how is there high stakes? How is there danger if there is no opposition?
Yeah.
And
I
so
think
that's kind of where, for me, I'm like, how can we help people and interpret that?
Yeah, and that's where this comes in. If there needs to be opposition, if it moves the narrative forward in order to have such, then you would use a spread to add in those layers of opposition, whether it be conflict, whether it be exploring a new space or a new place, whether it be a social interaction where there are elements that are outside of one's control that can change the outcome, which then changes the stakes because you can't control each and every part.
So here's where sorry, as a follow-up to that, then I remember a little while ago we were talking about the fact that, like, after every draw you shuffle again. So you're just imagine just like Yu-Gi-Oh style, like just shuffle.
Yep.
What's happening?
Yeah, the shuffling is in order to keep the math stable.
Yeah. This my brain is knocking at the door of an idea and I'm not sure what it is. So I'm just going to sit with that for a little bit.
Plus, the spread is a whole scene.
But what if... So the way you're conceptualizing it is that each spread is a scene. So if you have several spreads, they're different scenes?
What?
So if you have... So every spread is a new scene. What happens? So
if you're thinking on stage, and there's a social activity going on, your engagement there is the social engagement. As soon as it turns to a duel, it becomes a new scene because the focus is on the people dueling, no longer on the actual social encounter.
I see.
So you would shift to the new focus for that, for what's being played out.
So is there any situation under which you would stop using a spread halfway through because the scene has changed irreparably? or would you always play it out?
I mean,
would
you can always
is it
abandon a
always
scene.
finishing a
People can always choose to abandon a scene. They're like, nope, I'm out of here. And if you
everyone
nope
in a
out,
horror game should do all the time.
you know what I mean?
just nope out.
If you nope out, like that, there may be one more, confrontation or one more thing that must be overcome to nope out, but you may not get to the end because there's no payoff because you're noping out.
You don't get to the success because you can't have the success because you've had to nope out of the scene.
Because you've chosen to not engage with it. But if you engage with the scene in any way, shape, or form, I'm not sure how it can actually be irreparably harmed.
Well, I mean, if you reject the balance card, as in reject the finding of balance or the thing that could find balance, then you can't reach the success because it stops,
changes
like that
what kind of
stops there.
success might look like.
So success is not good thing. Success is conclusion.
Yes. You reach
Outcome,
the apex.
consequence.
You reach the climax of the scene.
Yeah, right.
And it could still be a good thing. Maybe you did steal the idol from the Temple of Doom, but now you've also, killed 84 people with a large rock that landed on them as you dodged out of the way.
I mean, that's not good in the, but I have the idol.
But the goal was to get the idol.
This is true.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's still viable. And that's the story that is being told at the table. Like, if that's how they want to tell the story, that's how they can tell the story.
Here's something that, like, I think keys in on what you were saying earlier about stakes and consequence and challenge, right?
Mhm.
So the end of the spread is the outcome of the scene, right? It's not necessarily success or failure. It is the outcome, right?
Yeah. If you think of card 5 as the climax of the scene and the card 6 kind of the denouement as it kind of wraps up. Yeah.
What I'm thinking is that so in this session we did more individual draws for different things, but what if those were paired to the to use John's word for a second, the river, for lack of a better term, right? So we pull a card in the middle, right? We know that how this is going to affect the narrative, but there needs to be some action taken by one or all of us to determine if this is positive, negative, based on whatever our narrative may be, right? To resolve that or to see what the direction of the scene is going, right? Because the way it is now, we're able to basically narrate through the entire spread, and that there's nothing wrong with it. Like, I really enjoyed that. But if you're looking for the rapids, right? Baking in like consequence at each step and a conclusion that is going to change because of these consequences, right? So when we pushed hearts down, right?
The 3 of clubs down and replaced it with the 5 of hearts. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we pushed the clubs down, and we basically established that no, water is going to be involved. We're going to have to do swimming, right? We had this split, and we were able to narrate through the scene, and I think it worked really nicely. But there could have been the possibility for a challenge on how to resolve that, right? That would say, well, we know where we're trying to go, but we can't get there because of this, right?
Again, that always goes back to does this move the narrative forward? So if it feels necessary for the narrative to add those in, then absolutely. That's why I added them in spots.
Yeah.
Because it felt like it added to the narrative in a way that changed it and gave it more richness. But if it doesn't, then you leave them out.
Well,
I don't want to
what
put in
I'm saying is, like,
arbitrary checks if they're not going to move the narrative forward. I would rather leave the rule as it is, that a check is instituted if it's going to move the narrative forward. That's my concern there.
And just to clarify, I'm also a fan of like fail forward mechanics. Like even if you fail the check, that doesn't mean the story stops. That just means the story shifts direction.
Well, of course. I mean, that's one of the key components about failure. Everything, even failure, has to move the narrative forward.
Right.
Like that's the number one guiding rule. But if a check is not necessary, then it shouldn't be built into the mechanic. Or if a check can be unnecessary, it should not be built into the mechanic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
I would rather have it be
I think you were trying to
to
say
augment each one of these. If this feels like a place where a check would add to the story, build that, put those in. I would rather have that than to do it the other way around, where it's built in and tell them to take it out if they don't like it.
Right. No, I understand that perspective.
So I hear what you're saying, and that's exactly what I tried to model here, is to bring them in where it felt like it would move the narrative forward in some way, shape, or form. But it's definitely of value. Like, what's the best way to get it across? There's a tendency in a lot of games to build in checks, even if they're not necessary, but for consistency in using the system.
Right.
And I'm not a fan of that as a designer. I feel like it slows gameplay in a way that's not necessary. So I'm trying. My goal would be to try and avoid that as much as possible.
I don't think like arbitrary tricks. I don't think is what I was trying to say, but more of adding in consequence to the scene incrementally. Right.
But how is consequence not already in the scene, I guess, is my question.
So I think this is I guess in my mind I didn't see a possibility for a negative outcome, right? Like we knew where we were going. We were just telling the story along the way, right? Again, super enjoyable, right? I keep going back to the question of like, how do we, like, if we want a bumpier ride, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And I think that has to do with how the challenges are presented. I didn't present extremely heavy challenges because I didn't feel like that fit the goal for our scene.
Like if we, as a group, we were in a mood for a heavier, more stakes, like an example was the swimming through. It could have easily been the, okay, Rook, do a check to see if you panic or not. Like it had already been set up that, and so if we were wanting that little grittier, that little extra bit.
And with more time, that may have actually made more sense. I did cut out some things just for the sake of time. But, checking to make sure that everybody could hold on and make it through is something that would have made sense and would have helped the narrative flesh out and move the narrative forward. But I skipped that in favor of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the sake of brevity, I totally understand that as well. So I think you had something else that you were trying to say, and I just want to make sure that you sort of say something.
Yeah, it was in response to both of those things, but it was going back to the flesh. It was an idea for fleshing out the sort of kick it down mechanic, maybe to add consequence in the sense that when I was describing why Indy would want to move that fate along, maybe it's a case of no, that does happen to a degree, just not the fullest degree. And so that then becomes a consequence because, they do start to get uncomfortable. There is something that could happen. I'm not saying there needs to be a check, but then that is a self-imposed consequence of no, I don't like this. I don't feel comfortable. I'm going to give of myself to this to change it.
What would you think of taking some sort of impairment?
Yeah, I think that would work really well.
If you choose
Sorry,
to take
I'm
something down, you would
Chaos
have to
Fae.
take an impairment of a -1 impairment.
Yeah, I think that would work really well because the whole point is, no, I don't like it. I don't want it. I'm willing to exert energy or exert something to put into this to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean,
And then that means that it's not constant kicking down, and it's not in every scene that people are just going, well, we don't like it, we're moving it.
Right.
that's how you would pay for the opportunity to kick it down. Does that seem to work in counter to your original concept, John? Or does that seem to be in alignment with it?
I processed about 60% of it. Can I get a little bit? Can I get that again?
Yeah. So when kicking down a card, in order to do so, you pay the fee for paying for it as you take an impairment to one of your connections.
Oh, that's fine. Originally, I was going to suggest that when you do it, you lose a card.
So when you're playing with
So now you're playing with 3, and then because your 2 cards are your sort of fate, right? Because otherwise you're just drawing from the deck.
Yeah.
So if you kick it down twice, now you're just drawing from the deck. Good luck. You don't know what you have yet. Like you can't hold the ace in the hole if you move fate down the line.
so a blind draw.
Yeah.
So
I'm
affects
all,
the math
I am
though in a way that I would have to talk to Emmer about, because shifting to a 2 card hand.
This is fair. I think it changes the
2
math
cards instead of 4.
I would like to hear what Amr has to say about it, specifically in the context of changing the math specific. Like, you don't always do that, but you can choose to ruin your own math to have specifically influence right now, which I think is an interesting trade-off. But that's
I like that.
Both of those are really great options. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I like that. I like the metaphor of deliberately messing up essentially your own fate. I also like the idea that the reason why you would want to kick it down is to do with one of your connections, and so taking an impairment to that connection as a result also makes sense. Like just mechanic as metaphor, like which metaphor is
why not
fits?
both?
Yep.
You have to decide one or the other.
I feel like over the course of an entire campaign that might.
Well, I think you have some ability to heal that at some of your time.
Okay.
Right?
I mean, so because I was thinking for every spread that you have start with 2 cards, you get them back, right? Because you get the back of the start of spread, right? So you can choose to burn your cards, or you can take a permanent one if you really like the cards you have.
You get them back at the start of a new session.
Scene, right? Oh, a new session.
Session.
Okay.
That's why it's so big. That's why it's such a big change.
Yeah. So I think
so. Sacrificing a card, you lose it for the session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what hand size resets at the start of each new session.
Gotcha.
That said, impairment does not. So if you really care about that card change, then you really care about that card change.
Impairment and you will have
different
impairment
for either one.
The impairment is something that you can fix at any point in time.
You just have to go do it.
You just have to take the time to do it.
Yeah.
And a -1 is something that needs maintenance. So it's something that you could reasonably do in like a short rest or half day kind of thing. Reasonably. But you have to make it a priority. So that's kind of where that goes. But we've gone over by about 9 minutes, so I don't want to go too much further. This is all really good information, and I really love it. But I think we're going to need to table our thoughts for now, and we'll come back next week with our combat encounter, or conflict encounter, shall I say. It doesn't have to be combat, but I think we'll try out combat because that's what most systems have, and we'll get a feel for what that might look like with Omens Rising and whether or not we like it.
I have a shovel and I'm looking to use it.
There we go. We've got a shovel and somebody needs to use it.
Excellent.
So let's go around the table in reverse order, and we'll start with Burley. And Dave, remind us who you are, where we can find you, and what you're up to.
All right, so again, my name is Dave Silva. I am a writer. You can find some of my articles on AGQ. You can find my books under House DOK Productions at Drive Through RPG. We have 2.5 games right now: Fractured Kingdom and Humans Rising. No relation. Along with the Burning Earth Arena, which is an expansion for Humans Rising. You can find us on Twitter at HouseDoc, again with a K, Pro, housedoc.com, and facebook.com/Humans Rising. We do spandex stuff.
That's awesome. And Andy, where can we find, or who are you? Where can we find you, and what are you up to?
Well, it's been a great night with the game. My name's Andy. Most active on Twitter at Anthony Tift. Do some writing, do some editing, volunteer over at the Dots RPG project, and editor here. Picking up, I've got some Lightroom for some light editing projects, so business inquiries, Andy at wiffernswing.com. And that's about it. It's quiet. The kids get out of school next week, so we're starting to plan out what the house is going to look like over the summer.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy, and it's good to have you. John, aka Rayamasa.
Yeah. Hello, I am either one of those things. Rayamasa on Twitter, RY0MASA. You can find me here next week for the third and last playtest we have here, I believe, on Nerdsmith, as well as next week on Fridays at 8 p.m. EST. I am, to my knowledge, still guesting on Concerto on Nocturne, which is a Vampire the Masquerade playthrough. Whether or not they'll let me stay there after I rolled a 9 for my first roll is dubious, but here we are. And then also on Wednesdays, now that Wandering DM has recovered somewhat to run games, I'll be back to, hopefully, knock on everything, I'll be hopefully back to playing Malifaux, which is a Through the Breach RPG, which is a weird Western. So, I'm happy. I'm having a good time. And those two shows are on the Wandering DM Twitch at, I believe, 8 p.m. EST for Malifaux, and on Devil's Luck Gaming at, again, 8 p.m. EST on Fridays.
Excellent. And Chantel, remind us who you are and where we can find you and all the amazing things that you're up to.
Probably not all because there's a lot, but I am Chantel B. You can find me on Chantel B at Chantel B on Twitter. I am a lot of different things, usually to do with words, which is why my website is wordswithcolor.com. Hey, look at that. Tonight, my time, but tomorrow morning, your time, I managed to persuade my players to let me run Monster Hearts again because they tried to force me to rest. I said no. So we're doing that. That's at 6 a.m. Eastern over at NE_actor, which is a thirsty, dangerous, and exceedingly toxic game. We on Monday at 7:30 at Eastern, I will be playing another game of Monster Hearts, but I'm in that one. And that one is more horror themed, and that's over at Gehenna Gaming. That's Gehenna Academy. And then new time for Unlawful Disorder, which is an open legend game that is 8 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. We have changed the time, and that's over at Lost Worlds Archive, which is my home channel. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here to everybody. My name is Chris Geary. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Geary. As a reminder, we are Nerdsmith for this playtest, and they are sponsored by World Anvil. You can find a link to World Anvil in the chat, as well as a cool little write-up of what they do. Die Hard Dice and Eldritch Foundry, which I forgot at the top of the show, as well as they have a Kickstarter out right now. You can go to the Kickstarter and get yourself a nifty little dragon egg pin with a variety of different LGBTQ flag colors associated with them. They were, last I saw, it was actually $350 away from getting them all done in glitter. So if you want glitter added to your dragon egg pin, definitely hit it up and see if we can push that over the $5,000 mark and unlock that final one of our
About 270 now, actually.
Oh, 270 now. There have been people. Excellent. So we're getting close, or they're getting closer each way. So, or each with each purchase. So we recommend that. There's also a Patreon. If you like what you see here on Nerdsmith, you can join their Patreon and help them continue producing shows. So again, thank you to We Are Nerdsmith, and thank you to everybody who stuck around to watch us as we went through our encounters, and to all of the members of the Omens Rising team that have joined me to tear it apart and see what comes out of it. Until next Saturday, we're signing off.